Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the show that I do with Tony Ortega every week where we discuss the events of Scientology over the last week as reported by Tony on his Substack. Hey, Tony.
Chris, good to be here and back in New York with you again.
Yes, back in your home studio with your Mark V e-meter in the background and rocking and rolling here. What a week. Obviously, the biggest thing we would start with is that evidentiary hearing, the sanctions that were issued. What happened and thoughts about that?
Well, I'm glad I did I stuck around an extra week in Los Angeles just for that hearing, and I'm glad I did because it was really interesting to see Danny Masterson's previous legal team, Tom Mesereau and Sharon Applebaum, represented by attorneys who were fighting tooth and nail against Judge Olmedo, who was trying to get to the bottom of who leaked this sensitive evidence in the case to the Church of Scientology. And I thought in my morning headline that morning, I was like, who's going to fall on their sword? I figured one of them was going to step up and say, hey, Judge, I didn't know this was wrong. I'm sorry. But no, they were questioning that she could even have the hearing, that she had the authority to sanction anyone. I mean, it was something to watch. I thought for me, one of the best parts of that hearing was when Deputy DA Reinhold Mueller, who was the prosecutor in this case, he and Ariel Anson, and they had, it was their evidence that was leaked. And so he knew very well what was in that evidence, what private information about these women ended up in the hands of the Church of Scientology. And that was the point he made really strongly was, look, this is not just that evidence was leaked to a third party and we're trying to figure out if that was against the rules or not. Mm-hmm. This was material about these women leaked to the very organization that's accused of harassing them and intimidating them.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just so disgusting. And yet, you could see that there was some question about whether or not this had been a violation of the law. And it's just, I think, terrible that it's a question at all. Because I think anybody that knows the situation realizes just how horrendous this is, that this private information got turned over to the very organization that's known for decades for harassing people, retaliating against people. Just disgusting.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to watch her sort of get to the point that it wasn't Philip Cohen, it wasn't Sean Hawley, it wasn't Karen Goldstein. She found that it was Tom Mesereau and Sharon Applebaum, Danny Masterson's first defense team, that leaked this information of Scientology way back in 2021. And we also learned a little bit more about what Scientology was doing with that information. They were going to the LAPD. Vicky Podbresky, the attorney for the church, somehow managed to get a personal meeting with the chief of the LAPD. Leah hasn't been able to get one.
Yep. That's right.
Right? But Vicky Podbresky got one. Mm-hmm. And not only did she meet with him, she had this material from the criminal case, and she was trying to make the accusation that these detectives were not were basically lying about the harassment by the church. And Mueller pointed out that she was making this complaint to Chief Moore of the LAPD and asking for an internal investigation a few days before Detective Vargas and Detective Reyes were going to testify in the retrial. That's just a classic example of intimidation.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just so... and look, this is the deputy district attorney saying this in a criminal court.
Yeah.
And yet it feels like nothing's going to be done. One little detail that really surprised me, I made sure and asked Mueller afterwards, make sure I had typed it up right. Mm-hmm. Because he said that he had recently heard from the LAPD that said, yes, they are doing those investigations, Chris.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So Vicky Podbresky, representing the Church of Scientology, is able to get a personal meeting with the chief of the LAPD, accuse these detectives of basically sandbagging in the trial in order to make Scientology look bad. And the LAPD has opened up investigations of them.
I just have to, You know who should get investigated is Chief Moore. This is unreal right now. The level of influence.
Where is the state attorney general? You know, how many times do we have to hear about how corrupt the LAPD is, how co-opted by Scientology the LAPD is, before the state attorney general does something?
Exactly. This is just unreal. And yet I have to comment on the fact that it is this exact thing that they have spent the last 30 years building and building and building with the LAPD. And I do mean 30 years plus, to infiltrate so that they could pull this kind of card when they really needed it. And
you know, I can't tell you about it, but I've got 2 other stories I'm working on that are very similar to that, where they have spent decades worming their way into places, and it's now paying off for them in a big way that the public hasn't heard about yet. I'm hoping to get those stories out pretty soon. But that's what they do. They just work at it, chip at it, and to the point where they can just get in a meeting with the LAPD chief anytime they want, get these detectives investigated right in the middle of a criminal trial. And all Judge Olmedo can do is sanction those 2 attorneys for doing that. Mm-hmm. And they're going to appeal it. Texas lawyer, who's an attorney who reads my Substack, says that she actually doesn't have the right to do this, and they'll easily get it overturned. It's just, you know, we heard so many things in that evidentiary hearing and then subsequently in her ruling that are just horrendous. The way these women have been treated, the way the LAPD is being used. And then at the end of the day, it just feels like, okay, she sanctioned them both $950. She didn't even sanction them $1,000, which I was told was the threshold where the state bar would be automatically notified.
Yep.
And they're going to appeal that, and they'll probably get it overturned. You know, it's.
I wanted to ask you if you'd heard on your end, because what I heard when I was talking about this on Friday is from a couple commenters was that it was purposefully done that way by Olmedo, because had it been referred or had that happened in some distant way, it's possible that this could have had repercussions on the outcome of the Masterson trial. I don't see how, but I am far from a legal expert when it comes to how these things work together.
Look, they're gonna throw everything in their appeal, everything they possibly can. And will they take some transcripts from this hearing to say, look, the judge is biased against Scientology? Count on it, because they're gonna throw everything possible at this, as far as, because remember how it works in an appeal, just so people know. The other interesting thing that happened Wednesday was that August 4th was only at that point a defense motion hearing. Mm-hmm. But then Cohen, right on the spot there, said, hey, can we have the sentencing that day too? And the judge said, okay. And which is, earlier than it would have happened. So now suddenly the sentencing itself is on August 4th. My personal suspicion is they want to hurry up and get Danny sentenced and get him to a state prison, which will probably be a little bit better than the men's jail he's in right now. So that's going on. Okay. Yeah, that's going on August 4th is the sentencing. But I'm just the other thing that was really kind of fun on Wednesday was, after all this arguing back and forth, Judge Olmedo whips out this 30-page ruling.
Right.
Which means that she'd already had her mind made up before the hearing, and that really bothered Tom Mesereau's attorney, but oh well. But it was a fascinating ruling. Did you get a chance to look through it, Chris?
I skimmed it. Honestly, I did not go through the entire thing because it's just so much legalese, and I have a hard time with that, honestly. That's why I have my legal interpreter on call. But what I did get told, and I was going to ask you because you were right there in the room. He had the impression from your transcripts, just right from the get-go, that Olmedo would probably have been rolling her eyes back so far. She would have seen the back of her head at some of the ludicrous things that were being asserted to her by Mesereau's attorney.
Okay, I'm going to do Olmedo. You ready?
Yeah.
So when Mathai and Crowley were throwing all these crazy things at her, here's Judge Olmedo.
Just up.
Like that. Just like that the whole time.
Wow.
She wasn't giving up anything.
Wow.
No, You're not getting eye rolls from Judge Olmedo. she just had this cold, hard stare at them, and then she whipped out her ruling. So
Wow. Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, because his analysis, his on the spot analysis was, this is some of the most ridiculous stuff I have ever heard in my life. I don't know how she's even putting up with this. These are obvious questions that no sensible person would be asking.
well, see, you're hearing that from that attorney, but then my attorney at my side is telling me that she really
Doesn't
is in
have
the
it.
wrong here, and I don't know what to think. I know that it was wrong what they did. There's
Yeah,
just no question. What they
that's right.
did was wrong. The Church of Scientology should not have this material. They're not entitled to it. And then what they were doing with it, they were trying to intimidate witnesses. I mean, when is somebody going to do something about this organization, Chris? I don't understand.
I don't either. I honestly don't. But I'll tell you, I'm more hopeful right now than I have been with this conviction and the fact that it's now established criminal legal truth that Scientology is
Well, it's
connected with
it's not
this.
just that it's not just that there was a TV actor who was committing horrible crimes and is now going to prison. It's the fact that all the stuff about Scientology that came out in the trial about how these women were victimized again by the church, prevented from, getting justice, all the things, and then just the ridiculous things we heard about ethics handling and everything. It was just brutal
Yeah.
for the Church of Scientology, which, yeah, I'm glad I was there for that.
Exactly. And that exposure matters. I've been making that point for weeks now that, the exposure matters because it's really public sentiment that has an awful lot to do with prosecutorial decision making, I think, as we know. Okay, now you also had a bit of an in-depth discussion with Mark Bunker, the vice mayor of Clearwater at this point, with some updates on Scientology. Any huge points we should go over on that?
Well, I let me just make one more point about the ruling,
Oh,
Chris.
sure, of course, of
The
course.
the ruling itself. I just want to point out one thing.
Yep.
April 18th, I got admonished by Judge Olmedo. I got a little
Oh, yes,
slap
right.
on the wrist myself
That's right.
because I reported what I overheard from a sidebar that they were talking about a grand jury, and then that DA Mueller had admitted that it was ongoing. Well, one of the things, if you look through her ruling, that's one of the first things she goes into is that there is a grand jury and it is ongoing. So she has totally confirmed what I reported a month ago. So that was nice to see. So I just there are a number of other things in that ruling that it is worth going through because I know there's some legalese, but in general it's in English.
Oh, cool.
And it's a great summation of the whole case. All right.
Great.
So after that, I think I told you last week it was tough to recover from the verdict, to kind of getting back to speed. And then I hung around for a week to go to the evidentiary hearing, so I was very focused on that. But after that, I was getting ready to go home. And I thought, what's been going on in the rest of the country while I've been stuck here? So I just thought of Mark, and he's been going through some things. And so I just arranged to have a conversation with him. And he had some very interesting things to say about the former mayor, what the current council's trying to do, how Scientology is worming its way into even more nooks and crannies there. Just same thing, like, he's one of the new things he had for me was that the Chamber of Commerce there has a different name they call Amplify Clearwater or something, I don't know, and that they recently had this dinner or whatever, and Scientology had a whole table, and Mark Bunker is asking them, this is the single biggest impediment to what you do, why do you let them have a table? And it's one of those crazy things about Clearwater is how are they ever expect to have any progress if they don't even have enough of a spine to keep them out of the Chamber of Commerce when they're clearly doing everything they can to keep commerce from happening there.
Right.
So I thought that was a very interesting update from Mark. And also we talked about Mike Rinder, and I thought I saw some really interesting things from Mark. He was pointing out that 20 years ago, Mike Rinder was trying to put him in jail.
Right. The Clearwater has been an interesting place to be for Mike Rinder and his history. That is for sure. And we should comment on the fact, of course, that Mike is. We now all know he is battling esophageal cancer and are nothing but our very best wishes, and everything else go out to him to
Again,
pull
go
this
to his
off.
website. Go to his website, MikeRindersblog.org. Throw a few bucks on the donate button. He's got some expensive treatments going on, and he could use our help. So, we're all rooting for him. And it was just really nice to hear from Mark Bunker, somebody that at one time had thought of him as the scary enemy when Mike was still the head of OSA and Mark Bunker was with the Lisa McPherson Trust. So very, very fun talking to him about that.
Nice. Okay, now I had to comment on another story that you published, a couple of stories actually, about OT phenomena and these success stories that Scientology publishes around the world. One, well done on the Church of Scientology finally coming up with, targeted marketing after 20 years. But the OT phenomena is something I wanted to comment on as an X real fast, because I don't know that a lot of people get the power of those. They look absolutely ridiculous to our eyes from outside. I look at it now and I'm like, I laugh at.
Well, let me just set it up so that for the people that aren't in Scientology. So, Scientology is this progression of courses and auditing levels that get more and more expensive. And they want you to keep going because it's these top levels that are the most expensive, where you're supposed to get superpowers and that kind of thing. So in order to entice you, there's this magazine called Advance that has a column called OT Phenomena, where people who have reached those top OT levels share some of their remarkable powers. And they share 4 or 5 of these stories. And they're the kind of, what the whole point is to get you excited that, wow, someday I'm going to be able to do these superpower things to keep you paying money. And Jefferson Hawkins at one time edited that magazine, and he told me it was the most popular feature in the magazine. And I have some thoughts about how they've changed over the years, but based on that setup, Chris, is that how that works? I mean, that's the carrot that keeps people coming and putting up with all the. I mean, because Scientology seems like it's really repetitive and boring, and but you've got those superpowers waiting for you.
That's right, and it is that exciting. As a Sea Org member, I used to look forward to the monthly publication of Advance magazine, because that's where the OT phenomena was. No other magazine from any other organization has that. And so this was the stuff to look forward to. And the reason why is because, of course, it's literally magical thinking. It's, it's the secret. It is, it's all the spirituality and all that of the 18 and 1900s brought into the 21st century. And this stuff persists because, and I just wanted to comment on this for people, that it got me, like I was stuck to it like glue. I could not get enough. And one of the biggest things about it is because the OT levels are such a mystery. It's rough out here to get the viewpoint of a Scientologist who does not know anything about Xenu.
Right.
At all. They are going through life completely oblivious to that very big thing that we all know about, and all the other things that go with it. To them, it's a carrot, it's a hook, it's a thing that is drawing them forward. What is on OT3? All they're told is galactic devastation 76 million years ago, and that's it. That's all they know. They don't know about body thetans, Xenu, volcanoes, none of it. So all they get are these OT phenomena. This is all they get to hint to them what's coming.
I see.
These are the little drops of, the coins that lead you to the big, pile of the dragon's hoard, right?
Right.
That's what OT phenomena represents for Scientologists. And I've never put it that way. I don't know, that I've ever tried to describe it that way, but I thought, let's respond to that. So,
well, to me, I have copies of Advance going back to the 70s, and I've been putting these OT phenomena at my website for years. And to me, the biggest change is that they used to be a lot wilder. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember OT phenomena where they're talking about, oh, my friend was having surgery in Illinois, so I left my body and went to the hospital 3 states over and helped guide the scalpel to the right place.
Hmm.
That's legitimate. That was from one of the advanced magazines, and then there was the ones where, you're in the park and you realize there's a thetan stuck in a tree, and you find that they've been there since the 19th century, and you calm them down and let them go out, free them from the tree, let them go on their way. Just wild ghost stories, right?
Hmm.
Now you look at the OT phenomena. This one in particular were nothing but little tiny coincidences about, I ordered my steak medium, but I really wanted it rare, and it came back rare, and I realized, oh, my postulate worked on the chef.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, and they're asking people to spend millions of dollars to get these powers. So I don't know. Did you don't you all doesn't it seem like they're a lot weaker now?
Oh, that's from your description. They are completely weaker. And I find that fascinating because this is the first I'm hearing of this, of your look at this. But I'll tell you what comes to mind for me is, what is it? It's 2023. So 25, almost 30 years ago, David Miscavige altered course for Scientology and started emphasizing read the books, listen to the lectures, give us your money for the buildings, give us your
Right.
money for the IS. And that's all Scientology has really become now. It's hard to describe a cultural shift in a culture you've never been in, but it's huge.
Yeah, yeah.
It used to be all about OT phenomena and spirituality and ghosts and supernatural phenomena. I grew up hearing stories like you were just describing. That's what I grew up with. Really, literally. My father used to tell me about implant stations on Mars and what a
Wow.
busy place the galaxy was, and I
Wow.
said one time, how come the center of the galaxy is so bright, from the pictures we would see? And he goes, because there's a lot going on there. You know? I mean, so this was the spirit of Scientology in the 70s and 80s, is it was a wild place, and the culture has now moved on. But I will say culturally in Scientology, with the de-emphasis on OT and on auditor training, which is where a lot of that stuff comes from,
Right.
the Scientologists just don't think the same way as they used to 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And that's a fascinating thing to
Yeah.
see.
I mean, I remember there were quite a few in the 90s, I think, early 2000s, where they would talk about tractor beams.
Hmm.
And that, I saw a car accident about to happen. I put my beams out. I directed this car away from the other one and saved them from having an accident. And they never thanked me because they never knew.
Yep.
That's the other part of it, is there's kind of an arrogance to it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff about tractor beams.
Yep.
And now it's like, I really was hoping it was a green light, and it became green.
That's
And if
right.
you're like, really, that's it? I mean, your predecessors were like moving cars with their beams coming out of their Thetan.
That's
Now
right.
you're just hoping for a green light. So it's quite a change. Really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit of a comment right there actually on that whole tractor beam thing, and again the earlier stuff, to what the auditor training will do to your brain. Because that's where that comes from. Pre-clears, just people who are just doing the pro route and just getting audited, they don't get all that data. And they don't necessarily
Mm.
think that way. And they think more like the more current stuff of, oh, I changed the green light, as though that's such a big deal. And the auditor guys back in the 70s and 80s would have laughed at them. You know what I mean? Oh, you
Yeah,
call that
yeah.
OT phenomena? Let me tell you. So
Right.
that's kind of funny. Okay, last thing I think that I wanted to bring up, at least that I thought was actually really big deal, although it acknowledged it's a baby step. Hopefully, this results in something. But in Florida, the
Mm.
Valeska Paris human rights suit had been relegated to religious arbitration, and we had all gone, great, that thing is over now. But what happened this week?
Yeah. So Judge Thomas Barber had forced that lawsuit into religious arbitration, but when he did so, he said that his hands were tied, that he knows how ridiculous it looks. He recognized that it seemed, just crazy. that these three former Sea Org officers would have to go crawling to the Church of Scientology for arbitration rather than able to sue them in a court of law.
Yeah.
So Valeska and the Gawain and Laura Baxter, they're three Australian residents who were Sea Org members who served on the Free Winds. They're suing for labor trafficking, basically that they were like indentured servants on this ship for all those years and treated terribly.
Yep.
They then filed a request for permission to appeal early. See, normally, after the judge forces, basically says you have no right to sue, you have to go to arbitration, then what they would normally have to do is go through the religious arbitration with Scientology. Once that's done and the judge accepts it, then you can appeal his ruling automatically, and the higher court has to at least consider it. Okay.
Yeah.
But they point out that could take years. Let us appeal now to the 11th Circuit. And the way that they can do that is you have to identify a couple of principles of pure law so that the higher court doesn't have to review the whole court record and all that. They'll just look to see if these two questions are legitimate. And what they settled on were, first of all, there was a question when they were fighting the arbitration ruling by saying that, look, those contracts were signed under duress. Mm-hmm. But the judge had said, according to his reading of the Supreme Court rulings, it's the arbitrator who decides if those contracts were signed under duress. Just incredible. And so they want the higher court to review that. Can't the judge himself see that these contracts were signed under duress? I mean, Judge Barber himself had said that at the hearing they had. Yep. Mark Bunker was remembering that he literally said, what if you had video of these Sea Org workers with guns to their head when they were signing this contract? He asked a Scientology attorney, wouldn't you consider that duress? And the Scientology attorney said, no, they signed it. Right. So it's just a ludicrous situation. So they want the higher court to think about that. Can't the judge identify that there's something wrong here? Why does it have to be the arbitrator? And second of all, this question of forcing Valeska and the Baxters into a proceeding that is essentially a religious proceeding by a church that they've left.
Right.
Why should they have to be subjected to that? So those are good questions for the 11th Circuit to ask. They now have been given permission by the judge to go to the 11th Circuit with those two questions. Now, I will caution you that this is the 11th Circuit that upheld the Garcia ruling about arbitration. So they probably still got an uphill battle here, but at least they've got a fighting chance, Chris.
Yeah.
And so we'll be looking forward to the document they file with the 11th Circuit. Of course, it'll be interesting to see the Scientology attorneys break out the smelling salts and act like they're incredibly offended and everything in their reply. And the 11th Circuit does not move quickly, so this could take a while. But right. It's an interesting, at least it's a glimmer of hope,
Exactly. It's a way to try to break through this wall we've been talking about for quite a while now, too long, I've been thinking, and I've been wondering what legal ego out there has a solution to bust through this contract law point, because as you said, Judge Barr was like, hey, my hands are tied. Well, somehow they have to get untied, and maybe this is the strategy that'll do it. My fingers are crossed that it will be, because somehow this has to be gotten through.
And to remind you, the civil lawsuit filed by the women who were attacked by Danny Masterson will now resume now that the criminal case is over. That lawsuit was also forced into arbitration, but a appeals court decided that in their case, the women are alleging harassment, stalking, surveillance that occurred after they left the church. Right. So it's not just that they're former members, but also the harm they're alleging occurred after they left Scientology. How could Scientology insist on that being taken to their internal justice? They're not, so the justices at the appeals court said, no, you can't, your contract doesn't last forever that way. So Scientology was super angry about that. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court, didn't get him anywhere. So that case will resume later this month. Scientology has already said they're going to file an anti-SLAPP motion in that case, which will probably, shut things down again as the court tries to figure out what to do with that.
Right.
But at least it should be interesting. And I'm hearing that there might be some more lawsuits coming soon, Chris. I haven't heard anything definite, but I'm keeping my eyes open. We'll see. There could be some more people. I think it is definitely a turning point when you have a celebrity for Scientology convicted of serious felonies against other Scientologists, and they're looking at up to life in prison. This should be a little bit of a turning point, and maybe other law enforcement agencies now may be emboldened to do something.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, let me ask you real fast, because this keeps going back and forth in my mind, and I can't quite settle on an answer to this. Do you know when Judge Olmedo does her sentencing on Masterson, it's minimum 15 per count?
Well, the way it works is it's 15 to life on each count. Mm-hmm. And this, let me just real quick review. If Danny Masterson had been prosecuted for raping these women at the time that it occurred in the early 2000s, he'd be maybe looking at 6 or 8 years on each of them. Okay. But now that it's not that the time passing adds to the sentencing, but they grouped them together under a very strict new law called California's one strike law. And once you group them together as multiple violent felonies under that law, now they carry much stiffer sentences. So now that instead of 6 or 8 years, so he serves like 4, he's looking at 15 to life on each one. And there's 2. And the one strike law says consecutive.
Oh,
not concurrent.
That was my next question.
It's not concurrent. It's consecutive. So he's looking at 30 years to life in prison. Now it's up to Judge Olmedo to give him his actual sentence. And she ordered a probation report as they do, which will, they'll go through and research him and say, okay, he doesn't have any priors and he's got this family. Meanwhile, all of his family members and their various friends will send in all kinds of letters to the court talking about what an upstanding citizen he is. But at the August 4th hearing, I believe the victims will get a chance to either stand up and give a statement or submit a statement about Masterson. And so it could be a very dramatic, very emotional day. That'll be August 4th. And it'll be up to Judge Olmedo. And I think I said to you before, based on my observations of Judge Olmedo over these 2 trials, I really don't think Danny Masterson should expect much leniency.
No, I'm expecting not. Her, I don't know, her attitude and demeanor certainly don't seem to indicate weakness to me or meekness. So, so I would tend to agree with you. He's probably not going to be seeing daylight again. And, deservedly so. What can we say? Okay, that all being said, any previews on anything coming up this week?
Well, I did mention I've got a couple more long-term projects about Scientology worming its way into some institutions, and I hope I can get those before too long. I don't know, Chris. This has been a very good couple of weeks for me. I've heard from a lot of people that have sent in some very interesting tips, and traveling, of course, sort of puts everything in the air. And so I'm doing my best to get caught up. But I think you're going to see some really interesting things. Also, some follow-ups to the trial. I'm working on a part about the whole Masterson case. It's never really been explained before, and I hope to have that out very soon. So awesome. Also, I don't know if you got a chance, I had a piece in Rolling Stone about the Masterson family and Scientology. So, and I think a lot of other news organizations have been doing some very good pieces about the case. I know during the trial, I heard a lot of complaints from people that they weren't seeing very much coverage, but I hope they feel that now this has gotten a lot of attention, because it seems to me it has. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know when it's coming up on my Google News feed that I've, it's okay, good, we're here. Because I don't get a lot of Scientology stuff on my news feed. It's not like that. So,
right.
And when I saw your article in Rolling Stone, I'm like, I mean, come on, this is as big as it's going to get. So well done on that, by the way. That was pretty cool.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, folks. Well, you see Tony's Substack address there. Sign up, get notifications, get stories every day. subscribe to his channel. I am. And of course, subscribe to this channel as well. And please like and share this video. And that all being said, I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.